You're listening to Inside iOS Dev, show about real-world iOS development. Today with you, your host, Alex Bush. And today, it's going to be an episode, long time coming episode, I think, this is going to be a rant episode where I'm going to rant about something, and specifically about algorithm interviews. So, as some of you might know, I was recently laid off from Wayfair with a lot of other people. Very unfortunate. But I'm back on the market, right? So I'm interviewing, and now I'm sort of talking to different companies and going through all sorts of various interviews in various industries. So it's fascinating how, you know, our tech industry in general, how obsessed are we with algorithms. So I get a lot of that, not with every company, but with a lot of companies, especially the big ones, Facebooks and Amazons and so on of the world, right? There's usually the interview process goes as follows, right? There is a first introductory call with the recruiter, then the first interview, which is typically some sort of a computer science algorithm problem or several problems. And then there is, if you pass that, there is an on-site where you usually have something like 4 interviews, 1 hour each. It's basically takes the entire day, right? Where they ask you, also varies and depend, but they usually ask you something more about your iOS skills, right? And then system design, and then behavioral interview, things like that. But, and it's all fine. I really love the on-site interviews. Most of the companies do it pretty well because they typically either ask you very abstract, big picture stuff that's sort of conceptually, some sort of an architecture that makes sense, and you would be solving those problems at work, right? And thinking like that about that. And then the iOS type of interviews are also great too, because they're gauging your iOS knowledge, right? Specifically, do you know enough about table views and its API and the pitfalls there, or do you understand delegate design pattern, things like that, right? But what kills me the most, and it just all these years I've been in tech industry for 9 years, maybe more at this point, and till this day I do not understand it. The algorithm interview, and I do not understand why it's so important and why we keep getting asked those questions. So, from my perspective, ideally, how an interview process should go, you should be asked about the things that you will be engaged, your level of knowledge and expertise and skills should be gauged about the things you will be doing at work, right? What you actually will be working on. So if you are applying and are interviewed for an iOS position as a mobile engineer, right? To build an iOS app for a company, you don't need to know about algorithms. In my entire career, there was, I want to say virtually never there was a case where I would need to implement a linked list or traverse a matrix or do some sort of a sorting thing. Like it's never a problem you're solving, right? Typically the problem you're solving, how do I fit this into a UI table view API, right? How do I use delegate pattern here and there to make it work? Or how do I use core data or predicates, and as predicates or something like that, to sort the data and to filter it such that I display only what's necessary in this screen, right? Things like that. It's never about goddamn algorithms. But then, some people argue, and you might say, Alex, but how about, if you're applying for more of a general developer position where you would probably be doing backends as well, you need to optimize there. And I would say, yes, I would totally agree with you. And then it makes a lot of sense to actually, gauge your knowledge if you understand how to optimize, I don't know, some binary search lookup something thing where you're optimizing load balancers on your backend, right, for your multiple instances of your server that you have. Then yeah, like optimizing that and shaving microseconds makes a lot of sense. But again, for us iOS developers, we don't do that. We don't solve those sorts of problems. The problems we solve is typically like the hardest stuff, right? How do I make my UI more responsive? And when you scroll it scrolls with 60 frames per second, things like that. You don't need to freaking know any algorithms for that. You need to understand how conceptually iOS works, how the whole system performs, and what's executed on the main thread, what's executed on the background thread, what typically could cause delays and jitteriness in your app, right? And then if you can figure it out, then you need to know and have the skill set to be able to use instruments and analyze the problem through that. Debugging skills, that kind of stuff. In none of those scenarios, again, and it's a rant of mine, right? You never freaking do algorithms. Like, you never reinvent the wheel, right? It was already done. And if you ever have to do that, you just look it up. You open a book that smart people already solved that problem, and you just read about it as you go, as you need it. You don't memorize it, right? And especially, you never, even if you have to do that, you never solve it in an hour on a call under pressure when other people look at you and you feel like they're judging you, your performance and so on, right? Like, sometimes you need slightly longer than 1 hour, or maybe you take a break and then come back in an hour or so to the problem, and boom, done. You actually figured it out. You cracked the problem. So how is this algorithm interview, computer science and data structures interview has anything to do with what you're doing at work? It doesn't. And that's what kills me. That's what, again, this rant is all about. I freaking hate it. It's ridiculous. I think it's an outdated concept that every company picked up from Google, as far as I know, back in the day, in 90s or whatever that time was. Google, or maybe actually after 90s, whatever. Google became that, glorious company that everyone thought it's such a unicorn. Let's copy them. Oh, look, they do these types of interviews. Let's also do these types of interviews because, look, they hire the best engineers and so on. Well, Google did those interviews because they actually needed engineers like that. Search problems and indexing problems that they have there to have their core product work, right? The core Google search. Of course you need to understand that. Of course you need to know that. But for a lot of other companies, no, you don't. And again, especially for iOS devs, it's just ridiculous. Backend developers, maybe they need that. But for mobile, we don't. And I think it's an outdated concept now. Everyone thinks they're, the next Google, right? That's why they just copy them and keep asking us those questions. Well, we're not in school anymore, right? It might make sense to learn those algorithms and concepts and how to solve those problems and memorize them in school, in college, for a test. We are not in college anymore. We are solving real-world problems. And again, as I already stated, as an iOS developer, a typical iOS developer who doesn't go deep into specific details of, OpenGL implementation or optimizing video performance or audio or something like that, very specialized cases. In 95% of other scenarios, where you're just building a general iOS application, you don't need that. You don't need algorithms. So Why we keep doing that as an industry and keep asking and subjecting our developers on interviews to that, I do not understand. And it frustrates me greatly. Like, don't get me wrong, I will, as I ramp up with my interview process, I'll, of course, dust off some books, like Cracking Coding Interview or one of those, and I'll read all about it, and I, get the rust off of my, skills there, and start being good at those. But what's the point? I think that's a useless thing. And again, even if it's necessary and sometimes needed, you can learn that. So instead, what I think we should be doing, to gauge on the first interview, right? I also understand companies trying to save time. They're basically, they want to figure out, is this candidate worth time to commit for an on-site interview, 4 hours of our other engineers' time, right? Like, do we want to bring them in and do all of that? So they need to filter some filtering mechanism. Oh, is this person, is this candidate, is this developer, do they even know what they're like? Can they even code, right? That's basically what the first interview is gauging. Well, I think the way better approach there is to either give them some sort of a sample code thing to practice at home, maybe not a huge exercise, but some sort of an exercise that they can quickly do, and have it be very iOS specific, or have that 1 hour, during that 1 hour interview, that problem they're solving also be very iOS specific, such as give them a code, an example code base that has some problems there, that has some bugs or flaws or crashes or something like that, and have them run it and figure out the problem and walk you, the interviewer, through debugging it. That, in my opinion, is going to be way better indicator of them actually knowing what they do about this specific thing, iOS, that you're trying to hire them for, and showing you that they actually understand and able to fix iOS problems or like improve or add features, right? Whatever the problem you're having them solve. That's way better indicator of that, right? Than someone who's good at cracking puzzles. Effectively, those algorithms are just puzzles. Well, someone might be great at that and know how to do bubble sort efficiently or linked list traversing something, but they know nothing about iOS. They don't understand how auto layout works. Like, they're useless then, right? It's just gonna take them forever to learn that because knowing the frameworks way more important than, again, for an iOS dev than knowing those algorithms that they can look up. Understanding and having knowledge of auto layout, it takes way longer to understand that and figure that out, and takes way more experience to be good at it than to look up in a book a solved problem for a binary search. That's, again, a solved problem. That's not that complex. What's complex, or difficult rather, is to recall that from memory under pressure. So yeah, I'm very much frustrated, and this is my rant, and I hope someday we as an industry will stop doing that nonsense, unless necessary for certain jobs, and move on and test developers better. But for now, unfortunately, everyone has to put up with that. So if you're in the same boat as me, I feel sorry for you as well. You'll get through it, I'm sure. Just, study. And yeah, good luck everyone on your interviews.